Thank you guys so much for talking to us. Obviously, so much uncertainty going on. Uh, First of all, just tell me how you all are doing right now.
So in terms of how I'm doing, I am personally all right. My family's all right. I come from the city, so yeah, I'm experiencing New York City specifically. I'm experiencing the pandemic differently than other people because of the dense population, constant movement. But my family's all right, so that's great.
Mm-hmm. Ryan, you good too?
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'm doing well too. It's like I said before, North Carolina is just, they're not as bad as the city, but we're still trying to figure out how we're gonna move forward with reopening. So.
And I do want to ask everyone if, when you're not talking, if you could mute your mic. Sometimes there's feedback. Great. Hunter, you're good as well. I don't know if we've met.
I believe we've seen each other before covering various events.
Makes sense.
Right now I'm doing pretty well, actually. I mean, I'm worried about my family's safety and everything, but thankfully, thank God, all my family members are staying safe and healthy right now during this time. I live in Arizona, so the coronavirus pandemic hasn't been as bad here, so I feel pretty lucky and blessed right now. Although who knows what's going to happen with all this reopening stuff. So everyone stay safe and healthy out there.
Mm-hmm. Hunter, I do want to start with you, since you're the person who created this petition. Talk about how you decided to create this petition. What's behind it?
Well, a couple of weeks ago, I found out that the university was going to be raising tuition from the Daily Orange, actually. That's how I found out about it. And I was honestly just shocked and baffled. And I think everyone was shocked and baffled to an extent. And, all my friends and family were talking about it. And, it was all everyone could talk about. And I couldn't just talk about it. I had to take action. And so I immediately started writing a 5-page letter to the chancellor. It was actually pretty scathing, but I realized that wouldn't be very productive to actually write that letter and go through with it and publish it. And so I decided not to do that. And instead, I decided to create a petition to provide an outlet for everyone else to express their frustration and have their voices be heard. And speaking of people's stories and giving people a voice and having their stories heard, I would just like to read something from the petition that I've heard some people making their comments. This is from a mother. We chose Syracuse for our son when we were a 2-income family before COVID-19. Now we are living on half our family income and be expected to pay thousands more in tuition. This is not the time to raise tuition.
Mm-hmm. Has the petition, obviously there's been at this point over 5,000 people have virtually signed that petition. Was that above the original goal? I'm not sure.
Do we have everyone there? Sometimes the screens freeze.
I'm here. So I don't know
Okay.
if you got my question. Right now, over 5,000 people have signed the petition. Was that the original goal? Was the original goal 7,500? Where are we on that?
Well, the original goal was to be able to get 5,000 in the first week. And so we're doing very well on schedule with that. I would like to eventually, within this summer, probably early June, to get 15,000 signatures. We'll see how that works, but I'm very impressed with how viral this has gone and how many people have signed just in the matter of a couple of days.
Were you surprised? When you go out and create a petition like this, do you actually think that it's going to reach its goal?
I tend to be a realist. I mean, I didn't expect it to happen this fast. I definitely thought I'd be able to reach my goal, but I did not expect it to happen so fast, so quickly.
So talk to me more about what would you have in your reasoning for why you want the tuition to be suspended, and in terms of tuition increases to be suspended, in terms of the impact to an increase like this has on people.
Well, I think a big problem right now is that the university is currently kind of ignoring the fact that there's a pandemic going on. I know they're trying to provide financial aid to people and help them, but with continuing their plan to increase tuition, it's almost like as if the pandemic wasn't happening, wasn't going on. And I think there are variables that are not being taken into consideration. Millions of people in this country have lost their jobs, and families are really struggling right now. And so, another problem is financial aid. financial aid is based on our taxes, and it's usually our taxes from 2 years prior. So people, when they look at financial aid for students, they're going to be looking at the financial aid for 2 years ago, how much money they were making, to not what kind of money people are making now in the pandemic. So it's not going to be accurate, and people are not going to be getting the help that they need. And to be raising tuition on top of this is just going to be negatively harming everyone.
So I guess that goes to how when they did raise tuition, they said that they were greatly increasing the financial aid. You're saying that even if they're doing that, it's not going to get to the people it needs to get to.
No, it's not going to get to the people that it needs to get to, because unfortunately the financial aid system is not even accurate the way that financial aid currently works, because it's based on our taxes from 2 years prior.
Mm-hmm. And Justine and Ryan, talk about how you saw the petition and why you decided to support it.
May I add something real quick? You asked them about the financial aid, and I will get to the question that you just asked, but can I pitch in about what was just mentioned?
Yeah.
We acknowledge that, the university increased financial aid. It increased by 7% over the fiscal year, and that's amazing measures. However, as we're discussing, the cost of tuition for all full-time undergraduates also increased by 3.9%. And with the increase in financial aid, some students are under the assumption that just because SU meets a large percentage of demonstrated need, that means a student will, for sure, with certainty, receive a grant or scholarship to cover the tuition increase. But what's important to consider as well is that loans, specifically federal ones, student direct, indirect, subsidized, parent plus loans, are also considered financial aid as well. And when you think about how financial need is formally determined, it's determined by the cost of attendance minus the expected family contribution. And some students have expressed that their EFC determination is unfair and not an accurate representation of what they think their family can really pay. And kind of going back to Hunter's point on how a lot of the financial aid was determined from information prior to the pandemic, that's just going to increase even more problems with that. So I just want to nuance that conversation a bit when it comes to the financial aid increase, and how just because the financial aid increased doesn't mean that that effectively cancels out the tuition increase, because people are under that assumption. And I also want to talk about the population who are going to be paying this increase fully, because as of right now, 25% of the student population does not receive some form of financial aid, and that's according to Syracuse.com. So many argue that these are students who can presumably afford this increase, but that poses questions for much needed discussion. So one of them being, why should a large population of the student body, about 25%, which is roughly 3,817 students, have to fully bear the responsibility of paying for this tuition increase during a global pandemic just because they can presumably afford it? So as expressed in the petition, regardless of financial background, many families have lost jobs, been furloughed, or had salaries reduced. And furthermore, due to the widespread uncertainty of this pandemic, the negative financial impacts of this are always in flux, even for those who come from high-income backgrounds. So just because a family can presumably afford the tuition increase doesn't necessarily make the situation fair. I also want to say that in some senses, SU is charging more for less, because even if SU is officially approved for residential instruction in the fall, it is a shortened in-person semester, and in-person events or services are either going to be greatly adjusted or completely canceled in order to comply with public health guidance, which they should. But that raises the question of why there's a tuition increase if there's a shortened semester and altered, canceled services. Just one more point on the financial aspects of this. So many of who make up the populations of students who pay in full are international students. And there are many international students who have already expressed concerns about whether or not they're certain to come back to SU for residential instruction. And that's because there's a lot of stress that comes with international travel, especially at a time like this. And there may even be possible travel restrictions preventing some students from coming back. But again, that's specific circumstances. So I just wanted to raise that point as well. But to get to the question that you asked, yeah, Ryan and I, Hunter reached out about the petition, and we definitely wanted to help with outreach. And you know, Ryan and I, we ran a campaign rooted in financial accessibility, rooted in student advocacy. So when a concerned student comes to us with an issue that essentially affects all students, of course we respond. And of course we try to help out in any way that we can.
So what was your, going back to when they announced this tuition increase, what was your initial reaction to that?
My initial reaction to that is just trying to figure out the rationale as to why they're doing this.
Mm-hmm. Had they had any conversations with you about it, or did it just come out of the blue?
So there weren't conversations about the tuition increase for this specific year. Ryan and I were in a meeting with an administrator who I'm going to leave unnamed for right now, and we were talking about the idea of freezing the tuition just generally because that was one of our campaign platforms, an ambitious one. And, you know, we came to a fair consensus that, you know, financial aid could increase with that. And it's conversations that will have to continue because, again, decisions like that, the administrator we weren't talking to isn't solely in charge of decisions like that. This is a board of trustees issue. So no, to answer your question, conversations specifically about this year, there were no conversations about that.
Mm-hmm. Ryan, I want to bring you into the conversation. Talk about your reaction to it. And I know you've done a lot with policy over the past 2 years. Talk about, can you see where the university came from with this, and where do you think they could have gone differently?
So I see what I understand is that the university is having financial problems. We all have read the Daily Orange articles. We've seen the coverage over this. We understand that the university is in financial trouble, but they have to realize that while they're under financial distress, so are students, and that, like Justine said, the way that they calculate financial aid is not always fair. So when they talk about, increasing financial aid, is that going to be calculated fairly? In the meeting that Justine and I were in, we both expressed this concern and said that, we would be more than happy to negotiate and co-op and, work with them if we were to reevaluate the financial aid system that we currently have to make sure that students are getting a fair amount and getting enough to come back to the university. I, for one, was asked to pay over $30,000 one year, effectively, even though that was roughly 2/3 of my family's income, my household's income. And they said, well, we don't take into account the fact that at the time I was a first-year RA. And we all know that the big pitch to be an RA is, you will get free room and board, which sounds great until you realize that then they slash your financial aid considerably. I've known a lot of RAs who end up getting the short end of the stick when it comes to financial aid when they Justine became an RA for second half of my first year, and we both experienced this. The university is not being fair or is not considering the impact of their decision making when it comes to financial aid in general. A student, if we were to put out just for one day, a form asking students to detail their experience with financial aid, I doubt we would get a lot of positive feedback. You might get some, but most of what you're going to get is, they weren't listening, they were calculating things unfairly, they didn't take into account, this, that, and the other, whether it be financial hardship, or the fact that when we talk about, I know that Hunter brought up the fact that they used taxes from 2 years ago. Well, they used your parents' taxes from 2 years ago, which doesn't always translate into what you're able to give. I've met more than a few students whose parents don't give them any money for them going to Syracuse. And so they end up having to take out, 6-figure loans to attend. We have to take them into account as well, that what it looks like on paper is not always what is reality. I think that we have to make sure that we are providing the best care and the best financial aid for all students, and increasing tuition is going to put a burden on every student on campus. When I found out about it, like Hunter said, I was shocked, and I was kind of just, why? There didn't seem to be a reason for it. Justine's articulated the fact that this is going to be a shortened semester. This is going to be a shortened year in general, with very few, with less services being offered. We need to realize that the university, well, yes, maybe they do need to offset for some costs. They're already taking away services from students. There are very few situations where you get less but then give more.
Mhm.
And I think that really needs to be understood by the university when they're making these kinds of decisions.
This next question goes to anyone. We did our own calculations to find out what the new total cost of attendance would be, because obviously SU doesn't exactly put that out there. They kind of lead people to, you have to figure it out, you have to do some math. The number we came up with was for underclassmen, so that's most freshmen, sophomores, a few juniors, is $77,200 at least is the new total cost of attendance. If someone were to pay all of the costs over 4 years, that would be over $308,000. Is that too much to be paying for college? Should the price of this university be far less for what they offer?
I'm going to answer this question by saying that the conversation does need to be nuanced in that not all students are paying that full sticker price. There is a percentage that is paying it in full. They don't receive financial aid or financial help. But then there is a significant percentage of students that do. That's all I have to say on that. I just think that the conversation needs to be nuanced when answering this question, because this is now about the total cost of attendance, and it's taking into other things into account, like housing fees, meal plans, student activity fees, etc. So I want to avoid conversations like this because the specific issue that's concerning me and a lot of other students is the tuition increase. If you want to shift the conversation to about the total cost of attendance and if students are getting what is worth it, I think that conversation needs to be much nuanced, but that's just me.
I'll comment on that more or less just because I do think that, Justine and I both agree that tuition is the main driver here, but tuition is what's driving up the cost of attendance. So overall, we're talking about how much is it going to cost to come here. And I do think the fact that tuition is going up, and that's supposed to pay for the academic of it. Everything else is supposed to be covered by the rest of the fees. Know that we're not going to be able to enjoy what those fees are supposed to be covering as much as we would in prior years. So why is it that they weren't reduced slightly, at least slightly, if tuition had to be increased? I think that the university really is not being cognizant of what they're asking of students, because if you were to get only loans and only U.S. government aid, that the impact of that aid is now being diminished because we keep raising the cost of coming here. It's been no secret that the university has been over the past few years, shifting some aid towards merit instead of need-based, which is not fair to students. We need to make sure that we are supporting students through need-based aid and making sure that we are supporting students from low-income backgrounds.
This brings me to my next question. The university and universities across the country is facing lawsuits that say the university should be partially refunding students because classes are online. Where do you stand on that?
I personally agree that the online classes is just not the same as the in-person experience. Period. That's all I have to say on that. I definitely agree. I think, again, conversations need to be nuanced and people have to be looking at what is specifically being charged and what should be specifically refunded. But I definitely agree. In fact, that's one of the things Ryan and I wanted to focus on. We wanted to focus on how we could give students partial tuition refunds. And in some ways we still are, but because of this tuition increase, now we're facing two major battles. So yeah, that's all I have to say on that.
Do you think there's a disconnect where the administrators don't really understand how a tuition increase like this could have an effect on every student?
Unfortunately, I believe there is a disconnect. I think sometimes the administrators don't know what's going on with the rest of America. They know what's going on their campus and their classrooms, but I don't think they know much of what actually is going on in inner city Syracuse or, out west in Arizona or in other places. Unfortunately, I think there's a severe disconnect from reality, unfortunately. And the only way that's going to change is through dialogue. And the university, the chancellor and the board of trustees needs to have a dialogue with not only students, but also parents, families, and alumni, so they get a diverse set of perspectives and a whole view of the situation that's really going on. And I think there's a lot of problems we could talk about here with the total cost of tuition and what's going on. But I think the main problem we're here to solve, the thing we're trying to take care of right now, is the tuition increase. You know, I'm looking for solutions. I'm trying to help solve these problems and to try and, you know, help fix things. And that's what I'm here for. But there definitely is a disconnect, and it doesn't help.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I just want to respond quickly to that question. The thing is that there are other colleges and schools across America who have acknowledged the realities of this pandemic and have suspended tuition increases themselves. So it just, again, when meeting with administrators, I really just want to come down to the rationale of why they chose to do what they did. I think that is something that could have been publicized more, so that way students don't feel as if the pandemic wasn't taken into account at all, because I would like to think that isn't the case. I really am trying to give the administrators that run our school the benefit of the doubt. But again, I think that should have been communicated more, and like what Hunter's saying, there needs to be more of a dialogue on this.
So are you saying the university could have said that ideally we would raise the tuition a lot more because this is having such a tough effect on us? We didn't raise it as much as we would have otherwise if we weren't taking into account how this has an impact on you. Is that what you're saying?
That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying necessarily that the university should justify what they're trying to do, trying to raise the tuition because of the financial challenges. I actually want to talk about that specifically. Yes, I acknowledge that the university has experienced more than $5 million in unplanned expenses and unrealized revenue
35 million.
due to the COVID-19 pandemic. But just because the university is expecting financial challenges doesn't mean they're necessarily in a bad position. Because we also acknowledge that SU has a $1.3 billion endowment and is in a much better position than other universities that are choosing to suspend the increase in tuition this year. So again, that's also not what I'm saying either. I think that there just needs to be more communication, and I'd like to see the rationale as to why. That hasn't been clear yet. But even with that rationale, I don't think it's a justified decision either.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I want to talk about the CARES Act, I believe it is, and how it had an impact on the university. There is nearly $10 million in aid that was given to SU. They have to give half of that to students. Should the university be giving all of those funds to students? Or
Yes.
how much of those funds?
100%, every last dime. If you're asking us to give thousands of dollars more, then I don't think that the university shouldn't be accepting $5 million worth of aid from the U.S. government. I think that, once again, American families are hurting right now, or international families are hurting. That money needs to come back to the students in full. And along with the fact that the CARES Act wasn't the most student-friendly act ever passed, it left largely, students out of the picture when it comes to the stimulus checks, when it comes to student loans, things of that nature. The university should be doing what it can to make sure that whatever they get from the CARES Act goes to support students.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say that the university is somewhat doing what they can, because I was reading the Daily Orange article about the funding that they received. Yes, half of it they were required to use in helping students with any problems that they faced during the pandemic. So that's housing, childcare, etc. The other half is up to the university, and from what I could figure out, and they didn't release specific information as to how they're using it, they use some of what they received in federal funding towards the increase in financial aid that they rolled out this year. So that 7% increase in financial aid that they have, they used some of that federal funding towards that. That's what I read on some news outlets. So that's at least admirable in some ways.
Before we transition to talking about the pandemic and what effect it could have on the fall, I want to get any final thoughts from you on the tuition increase and anything related. And Hunter, you can get something in on this too.
One thing I would like to say is that I'm glad the university is using money from the CARES Act to help students, but it's not going to be enough. A lot of families are going to be negatively impacted by this pandemic. Millions of people have lost jobs, and it's just going to be really tough on families. And I think another thing that people can't forget, I think is very important, is that, people, unfortunately, it often becomes this dynamic between the rich and the poor, but, everyone's going to be negatively impacted by this. And I think one of the groups that often gets ignored or forgotten in a lot of the economic discussions in this country is the middle class. And unfortunately, I feel like, and I know from experience, is that often the middle class is so forgotten, they end up bearing the burden of both the rich and the poor. The middle class is too poor to afford full tuition, but is also too rich to receive financial aid. And so that is a big issue that often happens, and there's this gap with the middle class. And I think this university's got to be very careful, and all universities across the country, that as a matter of fact, is that if we're not careful, we're going to kill the middle class. I kid you not. We are working to destroy and kill the middle class. So we need to be careful here with that. And that's going to be a big problem in the future of this country.
Mm-hmm.
And the university's just got to pay attention to what's going on. I mean, there's a pandemic going on. Millions of people have lost jobs, and the university needs to take this seriously. And another thing, I know we brought up finances and how they lost $35 million. I want to know how in the world they lose $35 million in 2 months. I mean, that's impressive. I'm assuming it's sports, but students shouldn't have to bear the burden to pay for missing sports revenue when the priority of a university should be educating its students.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So this petition, is out there for everyone. It's for students, it's for families, it's for alumni. And I'm just trying to provide a voice for everyone. I just want to read one more thing. It's really emotional, these stories that these people are sharing right now. This is from another person. This is a student. I didn't think I would be able to return for my sophomore year until mid-August when I got an emergency, extremely high interest loan. This is because of tuition increases and my financial aid being drastically reduced. With this increase, I'm scared that I might not be able to return for junior year. So this is just heartbreaking. People's dreams are being crushed. Part of a university education is that when you apply to a university, when you get in, you earn that education. You worked hard, you went and studied for the SATs or the ACTs or whatever tests you were taking. You applied, you put all your effort in. Tons of students are doing that. And this is no longer a meritocracy if we continue down this tuition path. We're just going to create an image, or at least, unfortunately, a perception of greed for the university. And that's going to look really bad for the university's reputation, the future. And I encourage all students, families, parents, and alumni to speak out and to try and help this university and look for solutions. I'm looking for solutions here. I'm not here to cause problems. I'm here for solutions, and I'm here to help, and I'm here to give people a voice, and I want people to be heard, just as I was talking about this petition, and hopefully this is doing that. Mm-hmm. Thank you for your time.
Thanks,
Thank you, Hunter, for that. I just want to say final comments on behalf of me, because I understand that my position's a little different as a student leader. I have to be the in-between person between administration and students. So I have to really try and consider all perspectives. So I just want to say that with the petition, the implicit purpose of the petition is to just start a dialogue on what can be done to remedy what many have called an unfair situation. And I think that important questions, points, nuances were raised in a lot of the exchanges that we've had. And I just want to respectfully continue to keep the university's rationale in raising tuition in mind when proceeding forward, but then also try my best to bring in those student voices, those family voices, those alumni voices, and try and bridge that gap. And so just to echo off of what Hunter is saying, to stress his point that this isn't just a petition that affects SU students, this affects families, this affects parents, this affects alumni, this affects the whole Orange community. And so if you support the petition, please sign it and express why if you can.
Have you had, before we go on, have you had any direct dialogue with university officials since the tuition increase announcement was made on that topic?
So the dialogue that I want to have with university officials are those with the chancellor and the board of trustees, because as we've seen with non-NSU negotiations, it's been made clear time and time again that the only administrators who have direct power over things like tuition increases, tuition freezes, tuition reductions are the Board of Trustees. And so I unfortunately can't reveal too much information because I am not allowed to in terms of Board of Trustees communications, and that's just not me being secretive. That's me binding by what I have agreed to. But what I can say is that I will definitely continue these conversations and presenting the petition to them, presenting what some of the concerns that were raised by this decision, and getting back to students when I can.
So can you say you have had conversations, or can you not say that either?
I've had conversations with some administrators.
Okay.
I cannot specify who, but those administrators don't have direct power over this decision, which is why I'm saying, no, I haven't had conversations with the people that have the power to do this. Yeah. Thank you.
So this actually can bring me to my first question about COVID in the fall semester. Many students have reached out to us at Citrus TV with questions, trying to figure out what the university has said, what they've not said, what is happening in the fall semester. Beyond what we've seen put out there in the public, what conversations have you had and what have you learned from those conversations with university officials?
So as of right now, university is making, Ryan, you're sorry, I'll start over. And I'll let Ryan respond as well because he's involved in these discussions as well, and I want to get his interpretation on that. So as of right now, the university is talking about wanting to bring students back. So a lot of the conversations right now have been about, if we're all back on campus, how do we go about making sure that students, everyone is just following social distancing procedures. And so just trying to come up with ways to have students understand, because, it shouldn't be this administrative top-down order that students should be following a public health protocol, that they should be wearing a mask, that they should be remaining an effective 6 feet away from other people. It should be something that is a shared goal across the community. So just trying to find a way of making that goal known, promoting that goal. That's kind of the conversations that we're having right now in regards to the pandemic. And I'll let Ryan speak.
Oh, you gotta unmute yourself.
Like,
you have to restart your sentence. You were muted.
I said right now we're just talking about how we're going to move forward. Justine pretty much covered everything. It's just, we're at the #1 party school in the country. There's no illusion about how things are going to go in terms of trying to keep people from social distancing. So we're trying to prepare for how do we do this all safely, and how do we keep students realistically socially distant and keeping them safe while attending. I think that Justine and I, once again, we're at the #1 party school in the country. We have no, illusions about, people aren't going to.
You accept there's going to be parties and there's university can do about that. We
accept that. I mean, we can put in a rule of no parties. That's not going to stop anyone. I mean, we can always hope, but it's not going to stop the students from doing that. So we should be trying to make sure that we work with, groups that we're trying to work with students to make sure that when these things do happen, how do we do them safely?
What have those conversations been like, specifically regarding parties, since that's what we're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, Justine can also speak to this, but when we have these conversations about parties, the university always seems like, well, we're going to have to stop partying when we get back on campus. And Justine and I always kind of just say, you can try. You can give that a really good shot. It's not going to work. But I think that we need to make sure that we are communicating with organizations like fraternities and sororities that may hold parties about how they do them safely. A lot of parties do it.
I want to respond to that quickly. So again, when it comes to this, campaign that's going on about just like promoting social distancing, promoting wearing the mask, promoting keeping that distance, it shouldn't be something the administration is top down telling us. Like, it shouldn't be we're relying on DPS to go bust down parties. I think, again, the point of the campaign is so that there's a shared goal with students, because, you know, I don't even know if whatever. I think soon there might be a survey going out to students on, you know, some questions about, like, maybe why they aren't, do you wear a mask and do you social distance, and if not, why is that the case? So just trying to gather reasons as to why students aren't necessarily doing what public health officials are doing. You know, there are many reasons that we could speculate as to why that is the case, but it helps to hear from students themselves and taking that information and trying to incorporate into the campaign. So, you know, maybe it could be a shared goal. So for example, if one of the reasons why a student is saying, hey, I am not social distancing because I just don't believe that this virus is real. I don't believe that this virus is going to affect me personally. Well, maybe one of the things that we could do with the campaign is have students who are directly impacted by the coronavirus pandemic speak about that and hear from other students on why this is like such a serious issue, on why this is affecting everyone on such an individual level and global level as well. So just things like that, just making it a shared goal.
If the university did, however, come out and say top down, you cannot have parties. If you do, DPS will shut them down. Is that something that you're saying you would oppose?
We wouldn't oppose that. We don't know how effective that's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We're encouraging the university to take the right approach. And while, yes, we don't, like, I won't be in 3 years, this may come as a shock. I've never attended a party on campus. I'm not a party person, but I think that in general, it's going to be tough to convince people not to go, even in school. We already know that hasn't stopped groups and organizations from holding parties in the past and not being allowed to. So I do think that the university should probably, I think that one of the bigger issues with that policy would be that it would make DPS the face of, you know, this policy, because they would be the ones to bust these parties. And that's not what you want. You do not want, you know, campus police officers to be the ones to be the face of a policy of cracking down on partying. We want students to be the face of this movement and not have DPS officers be the face of it.
So just so we're clear, from your conversations with them, you're saying that they have told you that that is something that they're considering.
It's come up in meetings. We're not sure how seriously it's being considered, mainly because of its effect.
Mm-hmm. Ryan, do we still have you? Yeah, we do. Okay. So talking about another issue that has come up a lot to us regards classes being moved to, or I don't want to say moved because we haven't actually heard that directly, but more classes happening on Fridays and happening on weekends. Have you gotten any clarification on, would these be classes that are actually being moved, or are these just new classes in general? What's your understanding of that?
I have not gotten any clarification on that. That was a concern I had as well. And part of the reason why people think, well, there are two reasons as to why. So because the semester might be shortened, you know, trying to make up for, like, you know, mandatory credit hours or mandatory field placement hours. But then also the other reason for that, because the semester isn't shortened that much in comparison to other ones. It's just a bit of a shortening. The other things with that is because of the public health guidelines of, you know, keeping students separate from one another. So that's why, it's part of the reason why, but we have not had any conversations about that yet. We're looking to get some more clarification on that, but yeah.
In that discussion, though, we've been talking with some students who have heard, you know, we all got the email about possibility of Friday and weekend classes. The university has to consider burnout. You shouldn't be asking students that could be going to classes 7 days a week. Students and professors and faculty and graduate assistants need time to take a breath. And I think the university is not taking that into account by considering weekend classes.
How concerned are you about how this could affect students who have jobs that they have on the weekend? This is one of the questions that we posed to Amanda Nicholson a few weeks ago, and she didn't address it directly, but how specifically is that a concern for you, that this could make it so much tougher for students to have jobs?
I mean,
So-
oh, sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to like speak to that because, you know, a large part of our campaign was financial accessibility. So of course that's a huge concern. If students are working jobs on the weekends and then having to supplement that with classes, or worse, not supplement it, have to just completely give up weekend job opportunities for that. Another part of our campaign was mental health accessibility. So you know, kind of speaking on to Ryan, what he has to say about burnout, there's just a lot of already mental health problems that are brought up with this pandemic. There are already problems before the pandemic in regards to students' mental health, but now because of the pandemic, there's even more. So having weekend classes and Friday classes, there's not even just financial problems with that. There's just mental health problems with that as well.
One thing that I will say is that probably if any of us have met an architecture student, we've met probably one of the most stressed out students on this campus. And yet they haven't said that this weekend plan for classes it would probably extend to the architecture school as well. Are we really going to expect students that already are working 25 hours a day, that go ahead and extend that to the weekend, which most of them already spend doing work as well? I mean, the university really needs to realize that this is not a good idea. You will have students giving a worse product for their classes. They won't be doing as well because they won't have any time to do it well. You will have students who can't afford to stay here because they can't afford to work. And by the way, most jobs that I've had, whether it be food services, rec services, things of that nature, they require you to at least have 1 or 2 weekend shifts. So you can't, I don't know who thought this was a good idea, because I also remember from a few years ago they were considering moving the schedule to be Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And the biggest opposition that the university got from that wasn't just from students, it was from faculty who thought this was a terrible idea. I mean, I can't imagine what faculty think of this as well. I don't see this happening, and I don't think the university would be able to convince any tenured professor to hold classes on the weekends. I know very well that Bill Copeland probably will not be holding any of his classes on the weekend. There's no chance.
He has the class in Maxwell, right?
Yep. Yeah, he has that infamous PAF, or now PST 101 class that everyone who is interested, it's one of the biggest classes that is taken. And he already holds classes on Fridays. I don't see him extending anything in the public affairs department past Friday.
Another question we asked the university that we haven't gotten an answer on is about the temporary hiring freeze and how that could impact students who work on campus. Have you heard anything about that? Are you at all concerned that that temporary hiring freeze could mean that there are fewer opportunities for students to work?
That would hurt. I don't know how they're going to.
It's a temporary hiring freeze for non-essential positions.
Yeah, I don't know how they're defining non-essential, though. That's my question, because, I mean, we have a lot of seniors that graduated that held those quote-unquote non-essential positions, I would imagine. I don't know how they're going to define that, because there isn't really any student job I've seen that I've applied for that I wouldn't consider essential. And I don't know how they're planning on moving forward with that, just because you're going to have a lot of freshmen who come in and who have never had the opportunity to apply for a job, who now are incredibly limited in their job prospects on campus. And once again, I don't know how this was thought out. I understand that there's a financial problem, but they seem to be cutting in a lot of wrong areas.
I just wanted to add to that. We don't know how they're defining non-essential because, for example, right, I work at the Source office. It's an undergraduate research office, and, I was offered a job to continue next there as a student research mentor. Is student research essential? I'm not quite sure. But the job is offered, and there are openings for that. So again, I just don't want to be quick to assume that that necessarily means that all student jobs are going to be gone, but it's conversations to continue having and getting further clarification on how they're defining that. and the rationale for that.
Another question that we've gotten sort of answered in the past 2 weeks from the university is about testing. The university says they're going to test every single student. What have you heard about that? What do you want to happen regarding testing?
I don't think we've had a conversation about that. I think that a lot of the conversations about the pandemic, Justine and I have gone to a lot of meetings, but the meetings have mainly consisted concerning how do we convince students to socially distance and wear masks. They haven't consisted in policy, which is frustrating because I don't know how this is going to be implemented. And it would be a lot easier for us to either get behind it or better inform it if we were involved in the conversations.
So I'm assuming,
I was going to say that, yeah, I know that they're, according to the Daily Orange and just according to a lot of the staff that I work with, you know, there are like working groups that the administration has formed to get feedback on things like, you know, how do we test every student? From my knowledge, Ryan and I are not involved in those meetings. I'm looking to get involved in those meetings so that there's more student voice on like how this return semester is going to look like. But yeah, to answer the question, we don't know as of right now how testing is going to look like.
What other just general thoughts do you have about what would be your message actually for what you have been brought in there in terms of getting students to social distance, to wear masks on campus? What do you hope the message directly is to students?
This only serves to help you. Social distancing, wearing a mask, it only serves to help you. I know, it's funny, isn't it even just me speaking about, I know a friend of a friend that was affected by this. No, I have someone I'm closely working with who has been affected by this, who he has in the coronavirus pandemic. And I think he's volunteered to actually, a part of the campaign, you know, share his story so that other students like him can see, yeah, this affects you as well. He's recovered, thank God. But, you know, he had to go through pneumonia and just hard times and his family worrying. So just the message that I get across is that it truly, you know, as much we as students get it. Ryan and I get it. You know, Ryan himself says that he hasn't really partied on campus. I have. Like, I understand the pandemic is going to get tiring. Social distancing is going to get tiring. You know, you're going to just naturally, as social beings, you just want to just, you know, go out there. You want to be around people. You want to be social. But at the same time, until there is a vaccine out, nothing has really concretely changed in terms of like the spreading of this pandemic. So social distancing still needs to be followed and adhered to. And, you know, it only serves to help you to just follow public health protocol. That's the message that I want to get out there.
Is there anything else that specifically concerns you going forward to this fall semester?
So something that specifically concerns me, and I'm just phrasing your question that you're asking about this generally now, and not just in relation to the pandemic, is just Title IX. I want students to know that Brian and I are both working hard to see what we can do in response to these new Title IX changes. And I think Ryan can speak on that more. We've been in meetings with administrators about this, and because this is something he's passionate about.
Yeah, I don't want to take up too much time concerning this, but Betsy DeVos's education department has just handed down new Title IX regulations, which make it all but impossible for a student to come forward anonymously and seek justice. So right now we are in conversations with different offices to see what we can do to better support survivors of sexual assault and sexual harassment, dating violence, and see what we can do to give them the best support that this university can offer. Obviously, the new Title IX regulations are going to become a problem, and right now the university is working through how they're going to respond to that. We're not even sure how long they will be in place. Who knows? Maybe by January 21st of next year, they won't be there anymore. We don't know. It's going to take some time for us to realize what this timeline looks like. But we're currently in conversations trying to see what how we can better change sexual assault response on this campus.
So this won't stop your, the pandemic is not going to stop your ability to implement change in other areas. You're still going to move forward with your list of campaign goals, I guess I would call it.
Most definitely. And we're going to have to be flexible when it comes to the goals in relation to financial accessibility or expanding campus resources, given the fact that the university is undergoing financial challenges right now. But again, that just means that we're being flexible. It doesn't mean that we're changing our stance on like some of our issues and like how we want to go about them.
Mm-hmm.
We've enlisted the help of a few assembly members to help us over the summer to try to better communicate with the university so that we can cover more areas and cover more topics so that we can better help students. We just started the program and we're hoping to get them in to meet with the administration soon.
Mm-hmm. Before we go, I do want to mention, have you heard anything about organizations on campus that are having trouble accessing funds that they may have had, or rollover funds not actually rolling over? Have you heard anything about that? We've heard a few things from some organizations about that.
So the thing that I'll say with that is that we've been in meetings with the Office of Student Activities, and also the financial analyst that honestly advises Student Association on rollover, on co-curricular funding. And so as of right now, so if you're not aware what co-curricular funding is funds that students, it's open to individual students and student organizations. They can use that, they can apply for co-curricular funding to fund things like food or travel that they may have not gotten funding from Student Association when trying to fund an event. So right now we're actually looking to streamline the process for student organizations so that when they apply for funds from Student Association, they don't have to go through the funding process twice, once through Student Association and once through co-curricular. So we're looking to combine with limits and with advisor feedback, the rollover and co-curricular. Rollover is going to be funding co-curricular. So now student organizations and students, that'll only be one process when they're doing that. And that just makes it a lot easier so that they don't have to go through two processes. And then with that, you asked about how, organizations have expressed concern that they received funding for an event, but then that event got canceled. So how is that going to work? Are they going to get that back? So one of the things that we've discussed with the Office of Student Activities is that it's just going to be this automatic thing. Whatever was agreed upon last semester is just going to be automatically in the fall. And I don't want to say that like with fully, I still need to get that approval from OSA, but from what we've spoken about, it's just going to be this automatic thing where they don't have to reapply. It's just we're going to be looking from that from last semester.
So it will actually roll over is what you're saying?
Yes, that's the goal.
That's the goal. Okay. Is there anything else I haven't asked about that you think it's important that you talk about, or anything interesting going on, any conversations or anything like that?
As of right now, no, nothing comes to mind.
Anything else you want to say? I guess I'll say.
I guess I just want to say that I really hope that everyone, I cannot say this enough, I really do hope everyone is well right now. I hope that you're healthy. I hope that you're safe. I hope that your summer, despite all this that's going on, is happy and productive. And please reach out to us if you ever need anything. Honestly, I will respond. I've had, like, for example, an international student reach out to me over concerns about, like, signing a lease. And, I was able to talk to them about, like, I cannot give you all the answers about that, but what I can do is refer you to student legal services, and they could give you guidance on whether or not you should sign on to this lease despite this widespread uncertainty. So like just even like little things like that, I really encourage students, anybody, to just come to me and like ask me any questions, and I'll do the best I can to help people.
And just want to say, if there's any story that you guys want to think of, that something that you think's undercovered, or it could even be just talking with students who had COVID, and you're talking about trying to get the story out there about how that impacts students, you can always reach out to me at Citrus. We're always looking for stories about students to tell. Okay. And thank you again so much for talking here today. Hunter, thank you again for also joining in. I know I front-loaded most of your questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I want to thank Justine and Ryan. I mean, they are amazing. You know, they really are representing students. And I'm just so grateful for all of their help and for helping me, you know, spread the word about my petition. You know, I really appreciate it. They're amazing. I'm very grateful. And then I want to do a little shout out to a friend of mine who's been helping me with planning a lot of this, Erin Sheffield. She's been a great PR person, strategist for me. So thanks to her if she sees us. And thank you, Justine and Ryan. And thank you, Ricky. Thank you for all the help. And thank you for letting me speak with you today.
You're welcome.
Well, on that note, I don't want to extend this too long, but just in response to that, Heather, I know you're thinking Ryan and I, but then I just also want to thank you and like students like you. You know, I think it's very easy for Ryan and I to kind of, because we did want to go about resolving this ourselves, but I think it just says much more to the administration that we could say, hey, this is something a concerned student or a group of concerned students have brought forward to us, and now we're trying to talk to you about this instead of us just trying to push our own agenda. So just like students like you, thank you for just doing initiatives like these that we will 100% back up.
So again, thank you guys so much for talking to me today.